You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and today we're diving into those power rankings as we do every bright and early Tuesday morning. Make sure you dive down below into those comments. Let me know your power rankings and your thoughts on my power rankings, maybe some of your thoughts and takeaways from this past weekend's games. But diving right into it, we're going to start with the bottom teams in the NFL. At number 32, we're looking at the Carolina Panthers. At number 31, the New England Patriots. At number 30, we're looking at the Arizona Cardinals. And then at number 29, we have ourselves a new team at the bottom four, and that is the Washington Commanders. So you'll notice at 32, 31, and 30, absolutely no movement whatsoever. All three of these teams lost, and it did not look good by any of those three teams, and I think it's fitting that they all stay where they are. The Panthers have fired Frank Reich and are now looking towards the future already, just 12 weeks into the season. So here we go again with the Carolina Panthers. I really don't know where this team is going to go from here. It is an awful situation to be in, where you picked number one last year. You got what you thought was going to be your franchise quarterback going into the future, and while that's very much still probably the thought process that they have, at least for now, it does muddy things up because you had a new head coach coming in to work with him, and it was supposed to be a guy who could be, work well with quarterbacks, having been a quarterback in the NFL himself and Frank Reich. But now the Panthers are just kind of a lost cause at this point, and I really don't know where this franchise goes from here, especially with an owner like David Tepper, who has a trigger finger for firing people. At number 31, the New England Patriots, and a team that could very well be picking within the top three next season, or this coming off season here in the draft, and at this point, I think it's very much needed. I don't know what they plan on doing at the quarterback spot going forward. I can't believe that they continue to just trot Mac Jones out as a starter and then kind of see what Bailey Zappi can do to try to pick up the pieces later on in the game. I don't know if they're going to continue to roll that direction or not, but I will say that I am ready for a new era again in New England, especially as somebody who lives in the New England area. It's almost sad to watch the New England fandom kind of crumble and just fall over, and the Patriots getting pushed to the wayside as basketball and hockey's going on. And I feel like this place has been a football town for as long as I have watched football, pretty much my entire life as that Patriots dynasty's gone on. But now it is gloom and doom every day, and I didn't even grow up rooting for the Patriots. There's a piece of me that kind of wants to point and laugh, but at the same time, I do feel for them because it is quite the fall from grace, and I don't even know if fall is the right word for it. At number 30, the Arizona Cardinals. As I mentioned when I was talking about the pick between the Rams and the Cardinals earlier last week, I did say that I felt like this team was more than just a quarterback fix away from being maybe trending in a better direction, and I think that was put on full display against the Rams this past week in their matchup. There's just a lot wrong with this team that extended far beyond just the quarterback, and I know Kyler Murray is there to bring a spark, but obviously plenty that needs to get worked on in Arizona as you end up getting completely blown out by a Rams team who themselves has not necessarily been the most impressive unit by any means so far this season. And then the Commanders at number 29. What a tough month it's been for them. We are now staring at the potential of a Ron Rivera firing at any moment. That is what I firmly believe, and I think that we'll probably see it sooner rather than later. I feel like it is time to really turn the page, as even though Rivera was brought in as kind of the guy to help bridge the team from going from one name to another name, and through the sale of the team as well. I think he has done his job, and it's time to kind of start looking forward to the future and really just finish flipping the page on this story that is the Washington Commanders and where they plan on going in the future. But unfortunately, for a team that, for whatever the reason may be, can't seem to really compete with anyone besides the Philadelphia Eagles, they sit towards the bottom of the NFL, in my opinion. Moving into the next four, at number 28, we have ourselves the Tennessee Titans. At 27, we're looking at the Chicago Bears. At 26, the New York Giants. And at 25, the New York Jets. So the Titans moving up a spot as they beat a very down-and-out Carolina Panthers team 17-10, scoreless in the second half. I thought that maybe, it'd be a little bit more of a handed victory for the Tennessee Titans, but for whatever the reason was, the Carolina defense really shut them down in the second half, and they were able to outlast the Panthers, I guess. But this is another one of those teams that, even in victory, it's still still kind of feels like defeat just based off the way the season has gone. I don't really know if you can sit here and hope that the Tennessee Titans build off this and maybe make a run, but they at least got a victory over a lesser opponent, in my opinion, and one game that I thought that they ultimately should be winning. They got it done. So hats off to them. The Chicago Bears moving up a spot here. As I've said often enough on this show, I feel like the primetime football games have just been an absolute disaster the last couple of years, and I don't really know why that's the case, but the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings got together to make sure that they continued to put on horrendous primetime games for the NFL. I will say this. For what it's worth, the defense, very opportunistic, giving what was kind of a spark of hope in Minnesota with Josh Dobbs, and have kind of just torn it all apart and just threw it in the garbage. I've got to give them credit for that. The 4 interceptions, even if some were tipped passes, some were opportunistic takeaways, the defense looked really, really good. I'll give them that. Offensively, how you managed to win a game just strictly kicking field goals, only the Bears can seem to figure out how to do something like that. Not really sure what winning at this point in the season really does for them, other than them just trying to prove to themselves that maybe they can be a far better team than what they've been to this point in the season. But this is a team that needs help and needs to continue to add to this roster. So, I mean, hats off to them for the win. Don't really see how it benefits the team other than maybe just building some momentum and helping to reshape the culture, I guess. But they still got the victory nonetheless. At number 26, the New York Giants with their 10-7 victory over the New England Patriots in what was another ugly defensive standoff between both of these teams, where I don't even really know if you want to call it a defensive standoff or just a game of offensive ineptitude, but the Giants, for what it's worth, continuing to get it done despite all odds, minus Daniel Jones. Now, Tommy DeVito as your quarterback. Thankfully, you have a defense that, for what it's worth, has been pretty good at times. And, I mean, at their worst have been, like, maybe slightly below average. So there is that to hang your hat on with this season. But outside of that, you beat the Patriots. Not really a ton to spout off about. I kept them right at 26. I didn't really feel like the win was that impressive or blew me away by any means to warrant any massive rise up above in the power rankings here. And the New York Jets, getting completely blown out by the Miami Dolphins. How do I have them above the Giants still? Well, they at least won the Battle of New York, so I feel like that is partially why I still need to at least keep them here at number 25. I think if these two teams played again, you could probably still get another Jets victory despite how bad the offense has been since they've swapped over from Zach Wilson to Tim Boyle. Yes, Tim Boyle. I don't really know what to really make of the Aaron Rodgers conversation in New York right now. I know that there's the whole, he might come back mid-December. At this point, the way this team has looked with how injured and just decimated the offensive line is right now, I don't even think it's worth it. Yes, would it be exciting? Sure. But it would have helped if this was like 4 or 5 weeks ago, not this late into the season where the team is basically falling flat. The offense has practically fallen into a coma at this point and is on life support, and it just doesn't seem worth it to me. So hopefully, maybe they can muster some wins together the next few weeks to make a potential comeback return more interesting. But with the way this offense has looked and even the defense starting to falter now, not too much I have hope with in terms of the New York Jets. Moving into the next 4 teams, at number 24, we have ourselves the Los Angeles Chargers. At number 23, we're looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At 22, the Cincinnati Bengals. And at number 21, the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chargers, as I've been saying for the last few weeks, fire Brandon Staley. At number 23, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, continuing their losing streak after starting out 3-1, have just kind of fallen off a cliff and taken a nosedive. The offense, every now and again seems to find it, but they are just so out of sync, and you're seeing plays that should be made, especially between like Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, that for whatever reason they're just not hooking up, and it doesn't really make sense to me because this is one of those teams where when you watch them play, there's so much that they leave on the field offensively that isn't even like stuff that you should be crediting their opposing defense for. It's literally just like an overthrow by Baker, a drop by Mike Evans, a drop by Chris Godwin, an overthrow by Baker, something along those lines, and there's a completely flatline running game over there as well. Defensively, they're still a solid unit, but a defense can only hang on for so long before they start to falter because their offense is literally doing nothing for them. So really unfortunate to see the way the Buccaneers have kind of fallen to the wayside. This was a team that I had very high up on the power rankings at one point in the season when they were sitting at that 3-1 record, but since then, very clearly somewhat of an exposure going on for them right now, and just kind of a tough situation in Tampa Bay. At 22, the Bengals minus Joe Burrow. It's, it is what it is. Another tough loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They at least hung in there somewhat. That was very much a game against the Pittsburgh Steelers I would have expected. 16-10 final score. Sounds like a Pittsburgh Steelers game. However, with the firing of Matt Canada, your defense gave up the first 400-yard game in, 58, 59 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't know if we're supposed to be giving more credit to the Steelers for that or maybe putting the Bengals at fault for it, but offensively it was not good. And even though the Steelers only came away with 16 points, they still had their most successful offensive game in like 3 years. And then at 21, the Raiders. I don't really know what happened. If you jump out to a 14-0 start, you're doing everything right, and then just Patrick Mahomes flipped a switch, and your offense just completely shut down. The defense from KC just completely turned it up, and you found yourself in a blowout by the time the final whistle blew. I don't really know what happened in that game. I was watching it early, and, I'm sitting here wide-eyed like, wow, are the Raiders about to run the table? And sure enough, 14 points up, and 14 points was it for the Raiders. Tough loss. One of those things where I'm just kind of watching how certain players play on this team and how everyone is just so rallied around Antonio Pierce is such a nice story, but there's talent is something that this roster definitely needs an infusion of all in a few different places, but another one of those teams in a really tough position right now that, rallying a little bit early on with Antonio Pierce first stepping in and now kind of falling back to the mean, and you're getting a more realistic take on what this Raiders team is right now. Next four teams we're looking at number 20, we have ourselves the New Orleans Saints. At 19, we're looking at the Los Angeles Rams. At number 18, we have the Atlanta Falcons. And then at number 17, the Minnesota Vikings, who fell to the Bears on Monday Night Football. Now, the Saints. I hate watching a great defense be thrown away, and this is something that I've been talking about with the Saints for the last few weeks now. You just have way too much talent on offense to, even minus Michael Thomas, obviously, with the injury he has right now. There's way too much talent on that offense for you to just be barely mustering 15 points against an Atlanta Falcons team who, for what it's worth, hasn't been too impressive themselves this entire season. And like the defense at sometimes has looked good and at sometimes has faltered. So for you to come into this game and just completely just lay an egg, the pick 6 to Jesse Bates, like it's a microcosm of what this season has been for the Saints, where you have your defense doing all that they can to prevent the opposing offense from scoring, and your offense just can't put it together for whatever the reason may be. Whether it's the scheme, whether it's Derek Carr, I don't really know the exact answer to it, but this is one of the more frustrating teams to watch, just considering how much talent is on this football team offensively. Never mind how good the defense has been this year, despite the offense not really helping them out much. At 19, the Rams moving up 5 spots along with the Atlanta Falcons here, but these two teams basically just being the beneficiaries of 5 teams dropping below them during this past weekend shift in the power rankings here. So while the +5 seems like a lot for their wins considering who they won their games against and so the struggles of their opponents at this point, I would say that both these teams just really benefit from the losers losing a lot worse than they are winning. And on top of that, the Rams and the Falcons both, you step into games that you have an opportunity to, where it's the Rams kind of, find yourself a little bit after slipping. And then the Falcons, you have an opportunity to take the lead in a very poor division in the NFC South, and you step in, you're at home, this is a game you should be winning, and you get the job done. Offensively, it was nice to see Bijan Robinson get involved for the Falcons. For the Rams, it was fantastic seeing Kyren Williams back in action. And these are two teams that if Bijan continues to stay involved like he was in this game, this is something that I think a lot of Bijan supporters were waiting for. And if Kyren Williams can continue to run the table behind that offensive line the way he has, Falcons obviously have a good shot of winning that NFC South. The Rams, while I would say a divisional win is probably out of the equation, there are 7 playoff spots in the NFC. You rattle off a few wins the next couple of weeks behind a really strong running game, open up a passing attack for the Rams and Matthew Stafford, and who knows, you could be fighting for seed number 7. At number 17, the Minnesota Vikings. My goodness. Where did the magic go? A couple of weeks ago, I'm, having a conversation with you all about Joshua Dobbs being the quarterback of the future for the Minnesota Vikings. And now a couple of weeks later, I feel like an idiot and a fool for even having that conversation in the first place. But it was good conversation nonetheless. But 4 interceptions. I know, half of them are tipped passes. Half of them are actually like just, really poor decisions. That last minute drive, where was that the entirety of the game? I don't really understand. And it's not like the Bears defense has been some like juggernaut by any means. They have not been. And maybe they're finding themselves and that's kind of what you ran into. I don't really know. But that was not the game I expected from Monday Night Football. So really disappointed to see that. I'm excited to see Justin Jefferson return. I'm assuming we're going to get it after the bye is what it feels like. I really was hoping maybe it'd be a little bit sooner so we could get a little more time with Josh Dobbs and Justin Jefferson. But for right now, really tough spot to be in for a Vikings team that was potentially making a run to the playoffs. You thought you maybe have found an answer after losing Kirk Cousins, and now you drop a couple of games the last 2 weeks, and you're kind of in that spot of, okay, this is like the dark reality that we were kind of facing when we first lost Kirk Cousins. Next 4 teams at number 16. Seattle Seahawks dropping a couple of spots here. And honestly, I wanted to drop them more, but I couldn't really rationalize the teams below them other than maybe the Rams being above them. So maybe that was the one argument that you could have made potentially, considering the Rams pulled off a clean sweep just a week ago over that same Seattle Seahawks team. At number 15, we have the Green Bay Packers moving up 6 spots here. Another one of those teams kind of really benefiting from a bunch of teams below them dropping this week. The Colts moving up a couple of spots with another nice win this week. A team that I just did not expect to be in the playoff hunt at this point in the season, but here we are. And the Browns, who had one hell of an offensive performance this week, and I don't mean that in a good way. We'll start with the Seahawks, who right now are in the midst of like a horrendous month. From getting blown out by the Ravens to barely beating the Commanders to the 2 losses that you've dropped these last 2 weeks now, you have to be concerned in the direction that this team is trending right now. It sounds like Geno Smith, he's not even on the injury report. It sounds like he's fine. And so at this point, part of my question was, how much is his arm bothering him? It was his throwing arm, so that obviously could be a big significant piece. But at this point, you're starting to wonder, is there maybe something else going on? And I don't really know what it is. I haven't really taken the time yet to really dive in and figure out the ins and outs. And maybe it is just injuries at some key positions, but there's definitely something wrong right now in Seattle. And again, you can look at the last month and their performances, and it has not been good at all. Among some of the worst for the NFL right now in these last 4 weeks, performance-wise. The Packers, at number 15, moving up 6 more spots here. Like I said, 6 is a lot, but it's also just because you benefit from, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams below you dropping down, and some of them dropping significantly as well, multiple spots at that. How about Jordan Love taking it to what is turning into somewhat of a suspect passing defense over there in Detroit? Earlier in the season, people thought maybe they had figured out the defensive side, but at this point, we're kind of falling back into the same Detroit problems that we had last year. A secondary and just a passing defense altogether that can't really get the job done and slow teams down through the air, and Jordan Love's having a career game against you. That's how you know there's definitely some problems going on there. On top of that, for a team that with all the offensive struggles they've had really coming to life in this game here, it's the defense. And it's one of those things that, a lot of people, I feel like, gave the Packers a lot of crap for the last few years with the way they've just kind of drafted defense. But it almost feels like now we're kind of getting the bigger picture in Green Bay. They were preparing for the departure of Aaron Rodgers. And what can you do to help make things just a hell of a lot easier for a young quarterback that's still growing and learning within your system? Hand them a phenomenal defense that can get the job done, force turnovers the way they did in this game on Thanksgiving in a wild upset against Detroit, and help out a quarterback that, he doesn't have to necessarily put up 30-something points a game to win. No, 29 points was good enough, and that's all they needed. Yeah, granted, he had 3 touchdown passes. He looked really good. He probably could have put up more if need be, but the defense over there is helping leaps and bounds in the progression of Jordan Love, and there have been a few games here or there that maybe haven't been the prettiest, but right now, at this point in the season, Jordan Love definitely looks like he could be a long-term answer in Green Bay, especially considering some of the young talent over there. Jaden Reed really starting to come alive late here in the season. Obviously, you have Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. There's a lot of fun young talent over there, and Jordan Love's going to be growing along with them all. At number 14, the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor, happy that he's going to be here in Indianapolis going forward for at least the next 3 seasons here. I'm glad those bridges were mended because my goodness did I miss watching him run the way he does. But on top of that, just the offense as a whole, not even just the offense, the defense as well, considering the situation of just moving on from Shaq Leonard and, the kind of stir that caused in the media world. And as somebody who roots for the Colts, a bit of a shock, I would say. I really was not expecting that. I know his playing time was kind of fading away, and it felt like EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin were on the field all the time, and Zaire Franklin was the one wearing the green dot on the helmet as well. I remember noticing that a few weeks ago and was like, that's a little bit curious to me. And now we kind of get all the answers. It's that, they were ready to move on from him. So with all that, I was hammering the table when Anthony Richardson went down to just, tank the season, suck for Marvin Harrison Jr., and, let's get like an elite wide receiver threat in here. And I was kind of among the people that thought, Colts may end up moving on from Michael Pittman, and that could very well still happen. But at this point, with, the way Michael Pittman's kind of flourished he's having a career season at this point right now. Maybe they opt to just keep him, work with Josh Downs, who is shining here and there throughout the season so far, and they're staying afloat. And I keep saying to myself, man, how good could this team have been if Anthony Richardson was still playing? If he can just protect himself, and this team has done, what they've done with no Anthony Richardson, and granted, Gardner Minshew, best backup in the league, and at this point, he might be better than some of the starting quarterbacks that are around the NFL right now. Funny enough, I know a lot of people are like, oh, best backup, but he might be better than some of your starters around the NFL at this point in the season. But I'm so impressed with the fight in this team. I feel like I'm always more critical on them than I am with any other team, as it's the team that I root for, and I never want to sit here and put personal bias on a team that I've rooted for my whole life. But I will say I'm impressed with what they're doing right now. Do I think that they're a playoff team? I don't necessarily know, but when you look at the structure at the rest of the AFC right now, things are very wide open, and they're in far better positions than a lot of other teams that honestly people had like shoe-in Super Bowl contenders, and we'll get to that in a second. And then at number 13, the Cleveland Browns. What a bad game. Whether it's a combination of just having DTR as your starting quarterback and just how good the Broncos defense has become in the last 4 weeks of football. Messy game offensively. And at this point, I feel, and I said this a few weeks ago, I wasn't really sure of what to make of the Browns. I didn't really understand what they were because of just the issues that they're having offensively, whether Deshaun Watson was under center or not. But they're a team that can run the football effectively. If they can just keep the ball out of the quarterback's hands as much as possible and mitigate their mistakes, they can be successful. But the defense also needs to be at the very best each and every single week, and it's just not sustainable. You're going to have weeks where even a defense as good as the Browns has been all season long may falter, whether it's because of just, circumstance, or offensively, you're just really shooting your defense basically in the foot at this point with the mistakes that were going on in that game and the fumbles. It wasn't even shooting yourself in the foot. It's shooting your defense in the foot as they walk out onto the field, kind of giving you the side eye because this is the 8th turnover we're seeing as we head back onto the field. But They rely on perfect defense and a very strong running game, and you can't rely on a perfect defense every single week for 17 games in a season. It's just not realistic. It's not sustainable. So I feel like I figured out what the Browns are. They're going to be competitive every week with a fantastic defense, but they need no mistakes on offense. They need a perfect game by their defense every week to get the job done, and it's just not sustainable right now. Moving into the next 4 teams, at number 12, we have the Buffalo Bills falling a spot here with their loss to the Eagles on Sunday. Then we have at number 11, the Denver Broncos, the same team that at one point this season I had sitting at number 32, has found their way as the hottest team in the NFL. 5 straight victories now, or is it 6? 5 or 6, something like that. Battling their way back, sitting at number 11. At number 10, we have the Houston Texans. And then at number 9, back again in the 9 spot. After dropping them 3 spots, I'm bringing them back up 3 spots. So right back to where we started a couple of weeks ago, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Buffalo Bills. Offensively, while you can sit here and look at like Josh Allen's interception and go, oh man, you know, he threw the game away. And I know the 0-6 OT record. Not really. And I know the missed pass in the end zone as well. That was awful. That was awful. But those few instances aside, these last 2 weeks have been the best offensively for Buffalo, I would argue, all season long. It's unfortunate that the defense finally faltered a bit and they ended up getting outscored in overtime, but there is positive in the darkness of Buffalo right now, and it is that with the firing of Ken Dorsey and Joe Brady stepping in, it seems like they are finding themselves again offensively, and they're bouncing back. You had a really good game last week in a couple of just key situations that ultimately cost you a game here. And I mean, you were an ungodly field goal kick away from beating the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. So, I mean, like, what can you do when the football gods are against you? There's not really much you can do in that one. That game was, in all the ugliness that was the weather of that game, the football gods smiled down on Philadelphia in that one. And there's not much you can do about that one. But there is some positive in the despair and darkness of a 6-6 Buffalo Bills team right now. This is not me trying to shine some light on a team that doesn't deserve it or anything like that, because you still lost the game and you're still 6-6 outside of the playoff hunt. But I don't think all hope is lost. I do think that there have been some injuries that have finally seemed to have maybe caught up with the defense over there, but your offense seems to have found themselves, as Joe Brady and Josh Allen kind of work to repair what was a pretty broken offense just a couple of weeks ago. At number 11, the Denver Broncos, as I said, hottest team in football right now. You cannot understate what they are doing over there in Denver. This last month, it's like the total opposite of what I mentioned with the Seattle Seahawks. Well, the Seahawks have had like one of the worst months the last 4 weeks. Denver is on an absolute heater with the way that they are winning games, with the teams that they are beating in those wins. They have completely turned things around. You almost want to like just take the first 4 weeks of the season or so and throw them out the window, because at this point, this is not that same team where, you know, we're looking at Garrett Bowles very upset, talking about being sick and tired of losing, and it's been 8 years of this BS. No, this is a completely different team. And you know what? For as much of the laughing at and, you know, all the fun making that has gone on about Denver, and this is not me jumping on a Denver bandwagon or anything like that, but I feel like this is them getting some of the flowers they deserve. On paper, this team has been built to win for the last couple of years. It's just been a train wreck coaching-wise last year, and it was still a team trying to sort themselves out from said train wreck earlier in the season. That's kind of how I look at this right now. With the defense playing really well and being very disruptive, Russell Wilson has a running game that he can lean on now, which opens things up for what he does best, which is extending plays with his legs, rolling out of the pocket and play action, bootlegs, and all that fun stuff. We are seeing the fruits of Russell Wilson's labor, of Sean Payton's labor. We are getting what this Broncos team was supposed to be coming into this season, albeit a little bit late. And now we have a Denver Broncos team that is right in the thick of the AFC conversation right now. And they have wins over Buffalo. They have a win over the Browns, who I know that did not look great on Sunday, but are a team that are well in the playoff conversation at the very least. They have a win over the Chiefs. This is a team that you do not want to face come January. At number 10, the Houston Texans, tough loss, really tough loss. A game that I thought, especially being in Houston, that they could come away and get the job done in, but ultimately you fall short, and it's a couple of rookie mistakes that CJ Stroud at this point is kind of like overdue for anyways, I think puts you in a tough spot. Also, just the struggle in the running game is the other issue as well. This team kind of lives and dies by CJ Stroud, and it's like if CJ Stroud doesn't play a stupendous game and doesn't make any mistakes, or does make mistakes, it's like, can you win? Can you count on your ground game? Not really. I know that like Singletary has flashed here and there, but Dameon Pierce was supposed to be your guy and has kind of fallen off, especially with the injuries he's had, at least this season, where Singletary's kind of taken over as the main back. So I feel like we're at the point now in the season where I think the Houston Texans have overachieved a little bit. However, all hope is not lost. You got a solid schedule going forward the rest of the way, some very winnable games on said schedule. If they get another win over if they get a win over the Indianapolis Colts, that would be huge for them in this playoff race that they have. So they still have that game coming up as well. I believe they have another game against the Titans still. I can't remember the schedule off the top of my head, but I mean, if you get that win as well, trying to win those divisional games and maybe another game or two on top of that, you can find yourself well in conversation of being a team fighting for 6, 7 seeds, something like that. The loss to the Jaguars definitely slows down the conversation of winning the AFC South. Now you're kind of banking on them faltering and blowing their own lead in the division. So at the very least, you can hope for something along the lines of like that 5, 6, 7 seed. But I don't think all hope is lost at this point. But we have seen some of the cracks in the armor of what has become a very strong Texans team. And then at number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Round of applause for a offense that found themselves above 400 yards for the first time in what has been like 3 years, since I guess like before COVID happened. So 400 plus yards, you get the win, 16 points only. You would have liked, maybe another one of those field goals or two to have found themselves in the end zone, but it's a start. You have a fantastic defense in Pittsburgh, one that can disrupt and cause problems, especially when you get close to the red zone. They don't let teams score touchdowns. They'll force teams into field goals if they have to. If they can just find themselves offensively these next few weeks. Pat Freiermuth is back, and Kenny Pickett and Freiermuth seem to have a very good connection. If they can kind of roll onto that and continue this thunder lightning thing that they have going on between Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, this is a team that can be successful. I think they need to. I understand you have George Pickens, who's uber talented, but you really got to drive this team through your running game right now. I think that the offensive line has really found a groove when trying to open up some running lanes. Drive the bus with your running backs, but you can take those shots. Just don't feel like you don't need to force the issue with passing the football in Pittsburgh. You can win with a strong running game that sets the tone and a phenomenal defense you have there in Pittsburgh. But hats off to the Steelers. 400 plus yards for the first time in literally like 3 or 4 years. That's insanity. I didn't know that the streak was that long for something like that. That is insanity. But coincidence? It's right after you get rid of Matt Canada? I don't know, Steelers fans, what do you think? I think not. Moving into the top 8 here at number 8, we got ourselves the Jacksonville Jaguars with that victory over the Houston Texans. At number 7, falling 3 spots, we have ourselves the Detroit Lions. At number 6, the Miami Dolphins moving up a spot here, and then the Dallas Cowboys moving up 1 as well. So the Jacksonville Jaguars didn't feel like the game was very tight. Divisional matchup. It's not like I'm going to sit here and try to like take away from their victory or anything like that. I thought it was a really good sound win for them, especially in a situation where you're going into Houston having already lost in what was a pretty bad loss to the Houston Texans earlier this season. That was like a must-win scenario, and they got the job done. So excellent job on their part. For me, it was just a matter of do I think that they should be leapfrogging the Lions right now? Potentially, and there's probably an argument for that with the way the Lions have kind of faltered. But do I think that they would beat the Lions like 6 times out of 10 or something like that? I don't necessarily know. The Jaguars are a weird team for me to read right now. I'm having a really hard time kind of figuring out what they've got going on, because there are games that they're winning that they probably shouldn't have been winning. There's games that they've lost that I thought that they were just not competitive enough in at all, and that's kind of been a theme for them all season long. Very weird team to kind of gauge, so I was fine with just kind of keeping them where they are for right now. At 7, the Detroit Lions. Again, as I mentioned when we were talking about the Packers, your pass defense has become suspect, and it's looking more and more like the defense from last year that basically cost you games and ultimately a real strong bid through the playoffs. I don't think that's going to be the same scenario at this point. I think that the Lions are a better team overall, but for you to be in Detroit against a Packers team who, granted, is finding a little bit of life later in the season right now. And again, they do have a really good defense, but the mistakes, my goodness, the mistakes. You have got to protect the football better than you did. You can't be giving away possessions or giving away opportunities the way they were. It was like Thanksgiving and they invited the Packers over and they were just like, here, have some turnovers. You got to protect the ball. Defensive issues aside, you got to protect the football, because while the Packers got the win in that game, I feel like I walked away from that game thinking, the Lions really kind of gave that one up. And if you want to be considered a true playoff team and a true Super Bowl contender, games like that can't really happen. You can make the mistakes and win, and that's like okay, because you fight through the mistakes and you ultimately win. And like if there was more game time on the clock, I think the Lions maybe figure it out and get the W, but obviously that's not the case. You only have an hour, you got 60 minutes to get it done, and you kind of coughed things up early in that first quarter. What was it? They were down like 20-7 or something, or 20-6. I don't remember the exact score at the end of that first quarter, but that was crazy to watch. At number 6, the Miami Dolphins handedly just taking care of the New York Jets. Honestly, in a much easier affair than I would have expected. I thought maybe the Jets would give them a little bit more of a problem, but ultimately, just kind of had their way with the Jets, especially running the football. A team that still has yet to really find success against winning teams. I have them at number 6 right now, and you could argue that they probably need to be a little bit lower just based off of their win-loss record and who the wins are against and who the losses are against. But for right now, they look dominant. So you might say a paper champion, something along those lines. That might be a good way to describe them. But they're winning games. They're in the lead for the AFC East, a very comfortable lead at that. And you can't take away what they've done in their victories at this point. You can just kind of point to the schedule and say, yeah, but look at their records. So I understand where you're coming from if you think they should be lower, but I have them at 6. At 5, Dallas Cowboys, kind of a similar situation as far as their wins and losses and who they're against and what their opponents' records are and everything. But the one thing that the Cowboys continue to do is they're going up against these lesser opponents and completely slaughtering them. The Cowboys are kind of, in my opinion, the measuring stick of in between where the rest and the best are. They're somewhere in that measuring stick area where it's it's them and then the best, but it's also them and then the rest is kind of where I look at the Dallas Cowboys. And I'd be curious to hear what some of you think of me saying that, because they completely smash on the lesser teams, but they've struggled in tight contests at times or getting blown out in other times against the better teams. So that's kind of how I look at the Dallas Cowboys right now. And that kind of speaks a lot for how I think of the entire league as a whole right now, where we have a lot of bad teams in the NFL, and there's really only 4 teams that I truly think have a realistic shot at winning the Super Bowl. And they're the next 4 teams I'm about to talk about here. Starting with the Chiefs at number 4. At number 3, the San Francisco 49ers. At number 2, the Baltimore Ravens. And at number 1, those goddamn Philadelphia Eagles, just continuing to get it done week in and week out, continuing to make me feel like I am making the right choice, leaving them at number 1 for as long as I have all season long for the most part. The Chiefs. This was one of those games where mistakes or just struggles early on get the better of you, but you come back. Patrick Mahomes leads the way, but Checo continues to just run through walls. I don't know what, the memes about him are as true as they come. He runs like somebody insulted his entire family on the defense and he's trying to make a point about it. It's insanity the way he moves. But for them to battle back down 14 the way they did defensively, this is a team that if they win the Super Bowl, And it's kind of something that a lot of people are saying right now because I hear it all the time. But if they win another Super Bowl, it's going to be on the back of the defense. I could see a game where maybe they end up winning it like 20-17 in the Super Bowl, something like that, where it's going to be because of the defense, not necessarily the offensive dominance we've come to know from the Kansas City Chiefs. It's that defense over there, and they're just that damn good. They figure it out. They might struggle early, but they'll figure it out and shut things down like they did against the Raiders. The 49ers, what can you say? You come in, divisional matchup. Some people wondering, are the Seahawks even going to be able to hang in this competition? And you just come in and just steamroll a division rival the way you did. This 49ers team, when they're healthy, is arguably the best team in the NFL right now. I understand that I still have two teams above them in the Ravens and the Eagles right now, and that's more so just because of the sustained success that they've had where we saw like a big falter and a 3-game losing streak from the 49ers. But when they're healthy, this roster is as stacked and is as talented and is as competitive as any other team in the NFL right now. And in large part, we get to see the Eagles and the 49ers go head-to-head literally this coming week, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I have no idea who I'm going to pick in that matchup, despite the fact that I still think the Eagles are the best team in the NFL right now. If this 49ers team comes in as healthy as they are, it's going to be a long night for Philadelphia, but Philadelphia seems to have no problem letting those nights get long and still coming away with a victory. The Ravens at number 2, best team in the AFC right now. I firmly stand on that. The defense has been great all season long, despite some of the injuries that they've dealt with, like here and there. And I feel like they're starting to get healthy at the right time right now, minus obviously the loss of Mark Andrews. But between how good the defense has been, Lamar Jackson obviously always being the threat that he is, and now the real emergence of Zay Flowers, I think, has just begun. He's been good all season long, but now he's going to get the opportunity to really step things up. And in a game that he had where he was dominating, he still had some misses. He can improve and get even better. And now he has an even larger window of opportunity. I understand the loss of Mark Andrews is awful. He is like with the comparison like to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, like that's their bread and butter over there in Baltimore. But now you have Zay Flowers as basically your number 2. It becomes kind of a shift in the hierarchy. You had Andrews as 1. I think Beckham was like your number 2, and Zay Flowers was the number 3. Flowers now gets to step in. As Odell Beckham is going to be receiving a lot of attention, Flowers is going to find himself open, and teams are going to have to figure out how to defend Beckham because he is still a threat when he has the ball in his hands or even just as he's running routes. And now you have to figure out how to defend this wide receiver monster between Zay Flowers, who is, it seems like every week is getting more and more comfortable in what he does over there in Baltimore. I don't know how anyone, Chiefs included, find a way to beat this team right now because they are just absolutely rolling. And the only team that I could realistically see knocking them off is the Browns because for whatever reason, that team is like their kryptonite at times. But they're the best team in the AFC. Best team in the AFC. I don't want to keep rambling, but best team in the AFC. And then the Eagles at number 1. It really goes without saying that this team just, they know how to win. They know how to win. So much talent on both sides of the ball. Even when people are going down, you have so much depth. That's the other thing. That's the thing about the Eagles too. When I talk about the 49ers and the Eagles, and this is kind of what separates them in my opinion, between the two teams. The 49ers probably have the most talented starting core of players in the NFL. However, the Philadelphia Eagles are literally right behind them. And again, that's not me saying guaranteed. That's just like off the top of my head thought. But the depth that Philadelphia has is better than what they have in San Francisco. And I think that's what gives you the edge with Philadelphia as the top team in the NFL right now. They don't lose games. They always find ways to win when the cards are stacked against them. That's what was it, 59-yard field goal in the rain? I accepted right before that kick even happened that Philadelphia lost that game, and I had Philadelphia winning. I accepted that they lost. I was like, there's no way this kick is going to happen. When they made that field goal, that's where Buffalo lost that game. And You're getting an unbelievable effort from everyone on that football team, from starters on offense or defense, your special teams, to some of the guys that are coming in relief and rotation. The Eagles are the most complete team in the NFL. Absolutely no question about it. You could argue that the 49ers starting core is probably better than what they have in Philadelphia starters-wise. Maybe. Very big maybe. But the depth in Philadelphia cannot be denied. We've seen what happens to the 49ers when people go down. They're not the same team. Philadelphia can lose guys and still be that same dominant team that doesn't lose football games. But those are my power rankings for this week. I appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end of the video. As always, I will see you all next time. It is 2:05 a.m. as I'm recording this. I hope you all have a fantastic start to your Tuesday. I'll catch you next time. Have a good one.